I know you guys were expecting the obligatory Orwell, but this week, upon reflection, I've been in more of a Mencken mood. H.L. Mencken, quote master extraordinaire, publisher extraordinaire, true beacon in the world of both social commentary, free speech, and the true nature of the American social and political experiment. The only good bureaucrat is one with a pistol at his head. Put it in his hand, and it's goodbye to the Bill of Rights. That quote speaks for itself in the nature and tie-in to the perpetual effort to take guns out of the hands of civilians because the bureaucrats know what's coming, but was especially reflected in the things that we've learned over the course of the past 2 weeks. Government working directly in tandem with private industry through the sinister machinations of bureaucrats to eliminate the Bill of Rights. We covered it last week, the Big Four working in conjunction with the pretty little bird. As it turns out, it didn't stop there. Not that this comes as a shock to any of you, but the depth with which they were able to penetrate this one particular platform and the enormity and gravity of the actions that they sought to undertake to undermine free speech, to directly censor and manipulate the entire American political process is far more sinister than any of the machinations that were put into place during the 2020 elections. Far more of a threat than any sort of voter fraud, far more of a threat than the quote-unquote misinformation that they try to rein in. No, this is nothing more than an outright grab at total control of the public discourse by the deep state and the agencies therein. It should chill you down to your spine. The mere prospect that they would attempt such a thing, let alone the relative success that they had not only in achieving their goals, but hiding the nature of the entire program from the herd. You've heard me say it before. If you control the stimulus, you control the response. Perception being 9/10 of reality, if you control the perception, then you control people's reality. Hell, in retrospect, it almost makes it seem that a lot of the resources placed into mind control experiments and projects like MK Ultra was wasted. We didn't need to directly get into their heads. We just control their perceptions, and therefore we control what's in their head by default. Mencken chimes in again, the whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by menacing it with an endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary. What are the hobgoblins they've beaten us over the head with for the past 6 years? Ever since their queen didn't get her coronation in 2016, it's only ramped up. Let's go over some of those hobgoblins. We've beaten the COVID thing to death. Hell, that's practically how this whole sermon thing came about in the first place. Right-wing extremism? Well, they used this platform, working through these guys, to beat us over the head with that one until you couldn't avoid the prospect of it even if you tried. But here's another hobgoblin. Who's the new Hitler this week? who's been the new Hitler pretty much since 2016. Who is the boogeyman that rigged the election and denied Queen Hillary her coronation? Who is the boogeyman who's seeking to take over all of Europe? Who is the boogeyman who managed to place a Manchurian candidate in the White House? Well, we all know we're talking about Vladimir Putin. There's a hobgoblin for you. But they got us a stage-managed dragon slayer, don't they? This coked up clown shoe, the Butcher of Donbas, showed up for a joint session of the United States Congress this week, dressed like he was there to drop off an order from DoorDash. You know, we've spent over 100 billion, that's billion with a B, in taxpayer dollars on Ukraine since this whole stage-managed wag-the-dog spectacle began. You'd think he could spring for one tailored suit. Of course, given the stiff-arm salute crowd in his ranks, that suit would have to be designed and tailored by Hugo Boss. I'll wait. Draping a foreign flag behind the dais of the Speaker at a joint session of the United States Congress, particularly a Ukrainian flag. You know, feel free to fact check me on this one, because I could entirely be wrong. I haven't looked, but I can't remember us ever draping a flag like that during World War II for our allies. During any period of war for our allies, for that matter. A UK flag, when Britain was under siege from Nazi bombing raids and V-2 rockets, to stand in solidarity with any of our allies. But there's that UCROP flag, draped behind the Butcher of Donbas, dressed like he was there to clean up after the session was over. It wasn't an act of disrespect. It was an act of stage management. He was draped in military garb, though he is not a soldier. Control perception, you control reality, and it's very clear the perception that they were trying to generate of this man when he showed up. And the entire joint session, with very few exceptions, stood and clapped like harp seals at an aquatic park waiting for fucking fish. Republicans and Democrats included. They hung this flag, and then they gave him one of ours to go home with. Why not? He's already got, through our compromised president, our balls, our spine, and our money. May as well go ahead and complete the illusion of us being a client state for this corrupt, fucking coked up butcher. But that wasn't all, boys and girls. No, the Congress had much more going on this week. An omnibus spending bill. That's right, they can't give your money away fast enough. They buried another $50 billion for this guy in the middle of the bill. Rand Paul, one of the few principled individuals that remains in the Congress, staged this photo op with the entire text of the bill. They were given 2 days to read through it before the vote. You're telling me that if you had 2 weeks, you could get through that stack of paper? I'll call you to a liar to your face. We all know what's going on here. Very few people, Rand Paul being the one notable fella, has the balls in the spine to call this out. But the people can see it because their perception control is failing. You remember the 4 boxes. We're past the soapbox. So on to the ballot box. Mencken had a few words to say about that as well in the interest of the practical politics he discussed earlier. When a candidate for public office faces the voters, he does not face men of sense. He faces a mob of men whose chief distinguishing mark is the fact that they are quite incapable of weighing ideas, or even contemplating any, save the most elemental. Men whose whole thinking is done in terms of emotion, and whose dominant emotion is dread of what they cannot understand. I will refer you to the earlier hobgoblins. So confronted, the candidate must either bark with the pack or be lost. All the odds are on the man who is intrinsically the most devious and mediocre. The man who can most adeptly disperse the notion that his mind is a virtual vacuum. How lucky for us, we elected one whose mind is an actual vacuum. But in spite of my guarded optimism heading into the midterms, that optimism, sad to say but honest, is fading. What is the option that we have left? This is Charlie Schumer right next to Mitch McConnell, the quote-unquote leaders of our quote-unquote two parties. There was plenty of bipartisanship, as always seems to happen when they're doing one of two things: voting for a war that nobody wanted, or voted to give away more money that we don't have. It's a spectacle, a staged, managed spectacle, in much the same sense as Zelensky's appearance, in much the same sense as the manipulation of social media, in much the same sense as every distraction that is put forward. So as our options become more and more limited, one's reminded of this quote from Mencken: every normal man must be tempted at times to spit on his hands, hoist the black flag, and begin slitting throats. There was another man once upon a time who said that those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. I wish there would have been a time frame where JFK could have shaken hands with H.L. Mencken. Right now, we all need to be weighing our options. Because no matter what, this doesn't end easily, and it doesn't end well. Now would be the time to reflect on how far you're willing to go, how far you're willing to be pushed, and in the final analysis, how far you're willing to take it. The opinions expressed by the Reverend are his own and no one else's on the planet. Not friends, not foes, not supporters, not detractors, not sponsors, and I cannot stress this enough, certainly not employers. They have been adjudicated thought crime in all jurisdictions. Consider yourself warned. They are coming from the heart. They are guided by the mind, and they are guaranteed to choke you with a big, fat dose of tinsel and baby's breath laden, mistletoe hanging, holiday spirit truth cock. Welcome back, boys and girls. It's time once again for the Sunday sermon. All that darkness, then we make it festive with the truth cock, and then we just jump right on into the bumper music. I'm not real big on segues. Let's see where the energy is, people. Everybody in for the drum roll. Merry Christmas, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. A little sip of liquid enthusiasm to get things going for you this evening. I'm going to fade the volume down on that bumper music just a little bit. We're going to do a little bit of a roll call. My apologies for the belated entry. We had a little bit of network difficulty getting everything situated. This particular computer hadn't been fired up in a while, so that's where we're at right now. Merry Christmas, first of all. To my Christian friends, Merry Christmas. To my Asatru friends, God Yule. To my Hebrew friends, Happy Hanukkah. To my atheist friends, best of luck. Hope it works out for you, Sparky. Happy to have everybody on board. Real quick roll call, man. Let's see who decided to join us. We've got Roman and, of course, his lovely wife, Carrie, from Opium Tales. Happy to see everybody on board. The original Sinner Sister herself, Miss Emmy, on board early. Happy to have you back. Pretty Mama, how you doing? Gonna roll on through here. Modi Sands on board once again, man. You're practically becoming a regular. I don't know if there's a bonus point program or anything like that, but maybe once we get that first round of books and shirts out, we can send you one. Joel Allen Jackson was just sharing a story about you last night. One of those that we can't talk about until the statute of limitations runs out. Well, statute of limitations is out, and it was a funny old story, man. We got Bill Wade on board. Good to see you once again, Mr. Wade, man. Happy to have you here. Merry Christmas to you and yours as well. Let's see who else we got on board, man. Brother David McConnell. Old friend of mine from back in the days, and of course, Brother Ryan Jenkins. Good talking to you earlier, man. Hope you're being safe out there on the site. No more weird disasters like we had in the middle of the sermon last week, man, with the lubricator. Ironically, what was that? I missed the comment. Ironically, zero accountability for all the actions undertaken. Yes, and that is the nature of things, is it not? So, anyway, man, all the usual suspects are here, man. We're going to jump on into this thing. Been a long week on the news front, but again, we are in a different direction. Got to acknowledge all the stuff that's going on, but we're not going to feed into the black pill stuff. We're going to acknowledge it. We're going to take a look at it. We're going to figure out, how we're going to... Don't start, goddammit. Don't start. You're going to get me out of my... You get me out of my zone right out of the starting gate, you motherfucker. We're not going to get black-pilled about any of this stuff, man. This is the holidays. It's time for reflection. Time for counting those blessings. And just taking a good hard look at all of the ways that our lives are intertwined. Looking at all the ways that our lives are affected by things outside of our control, but realizing at the end of the day exactly how blessed we are, taking it and moving forward from there. So hopefully the darkness there in the opener didn't give you the wrong impression. But we're going to be covering all of that. We're going to be covering a podcast that I've been following that got me thinking about some things with regard to the possible responses with regard to the stuff that we were discussing in the intro, man. It's going to be interesting. We're just kind of winging it today because, it's Christmas. Just kind of free form, just kind of flowing loose. I'm just happy that you guys are here. And believe me, I understand if you got to duck out early because you got family things going on. We're totally cool, man. No harm, no foul, no offense taken. Believe it. I'm just happy that you guys took the time, just a little bit of time, out of your Christmas festivities, and decided to pay the old fat old cripple a visit. Gonna go ahead and fade the bumper music out, man. We're gonna jump on into this thing, man. Once again, thank you guys, all of you, for being here, for continuing to support the program. You get that feeling of being a lone voice in the wilderness, man. You do, particularly when you're thinking outside the box, thinking outside the mainstream, thinking in opposition to the prevailing narrative. It's lonely, man. It's lonely. And just to find anybody who's willing to interact and willing to listen, the fact that I can put this out here as sort of my default therapy once a week, just to get this stuff out, and the fact that you guys continue to show up and find what I have to offer interesting enough, because time is our most valuable asset, man. The older one gets, the more one realizes that is the asset. And when you're coming up on your last breath, the one thing that you're going to want more than anything else in the world is not the things that we want now. You're not going to want more money. You're not going to want more money, more pussy, more a nicer car. You're going to wish you had more fucking time. So when you guys choose to offer your time to me, to spend it here with me, that's heavy. That's it's an act of very high respect, that limited asset that you have, that you choose to give it to me, and my trade-off for that is doing my best not to waste it. To make sure that you come away from this a little sharper, a little smarter, maybe knowing something that you didn't, that you come away from it better than when you arrived. I don't want to waste that time, because I know it's a valuable asset. So I really appreciate you guys handing that to me, and in exchange, hopefully, I am able to deliver. One of the reasons why I wanted to take a different direction when I had that sort of epiphany, a few weeks back, a month ago back, was that I felt like I was becoming part of the noise. You guys know the directives. I felt like that my own noise was overwhelming my own signal, and that became problematic from the standpoint of, you guys are giving me your time, and I felt like, even though you guys might not have felt that way, I felt like I was wasting it. Because if you want to hear somebody gripe, if you want to hear somebody angry and pissed off at the world, then, man, you can take that anywhere. You can find that anywhere. I mean, granted, I've got a little more rage than most, and I'm able to articulate it better than most. But if all you want to hear somebody do is gripe, man, you can go anywhere for that. So I felt convicted in my heart, and I felt like I really needed to take it in a different direction. Brother Roger, Merry Christmas part. I've always loved hearing what you had to say. Roger, I have loved seeing you grow, and I'm glad that you've always loved hearing what I had to say, because I've always loved seeing you evolve. You guys that don't know, Roger, I'm gonna put you out here on Front Street for a minute, man. Roger's a damn good man. I have known this kid literally since he was 13, 14 years old. He used to train with us out there in the old days, back in '93 at Denver Harbor Park in Houston. Denver Harbor's been, I wouldn't go so far as to say gentrified yet, but definitely in the process. But we don't have our old tennis court there anymore, man. We used to get out in the blazing Houston summers and train with Saul, may he rest in peace. Roger was one of the originals, man, and he was always the best of us. He was. We had a good group of kids out there in Denver Harbor, but Roger was always. He was always the guy that was destined for greatness, as Saul used to be very fond of saying. And I've watched him grow into, a good father, good husband, good cop, good man. That evolution has just been an honor to watch. Roman, you will remember Roger. I'm sure, Roman, you will definitely remember Roger from training out there at the tennis court in Denver Harbor back in the day. Roger probably remembers you drifting through, but again, it's been a long time, and we're all old, and our brains are starting to fade. But anyway, Roger, thank you for jumping on this Christmas edition of the sermon and dropping that on me, man. That was the best present I could have hoped for. Just to know that just to know that anything that I've had to offer had an effect on your life, man. I'm really proud of your journey, and I'm really proud of everything you've become. So thank you for that. Before I get yeah, right. Yeah, see, Roman remembers. I remember Roger, great work ethic and super humble too. Was there to learn, definitely, man, definitely. And I remember me and Roger going up back before they had back before MMA was really a thing, and where it was like damn near impossible to get fights anywhere. And hell, man, they were holding. Back in the early days, they'd throw mats on the floor of a high school gymnasium, and you just go out there and put it on. I remember, what did they call it? The no games back in Austin in '95, and me and Roger and Armidio Perez fucking went up there and just fucking wrecked shop, whipped the fuck out of everybody they put in front of us. You remember it, Roger? Man, we showed up and we got out. Everybody else was like in gis or fucking wrestling singlets or what the fuck ever. And we got out there in tie trunks and started jumping rope, and everybody was kind of looking over laughing. That's all we had, tie trunks, shirtless, jumping rope, and everybody just kind of like, what's up with these guys? And we just went in and fucking trashed everybody. Roger actually had to fight twice that day, and whipped the fuck out of both his guys, man. I've still got that tape on VHS floating around here somewhere. I gotta get that thing digitized so we can put it on. Let me get this out of the way real quick, man, because there's going to be a lot of tangents today. We're doing it wide open, and I'm gonna wear those emotions on the coat sleeve. Oh, speaking of weird things on the coat sleeve, so we opted for this. This is everybody's got their holiday sweater. This is my Christmas sweater here. I figure if they're gonna saddle me with that label, I'm gonna wear it. So anyway. Sponsor shout outs. Let's get that out of the way real quick. First of all, to Roman and his lovely wife Carrie, and Allie and Roxy and the bevy of beautiful women over at opiumtales.com. They are the erotic pinups and portraits people. Roman has always been a phenomenally talented artist on all fronts. Musician, visual artist, you name it. He's got it covered. But he's doing some really amazing watercolor work over there. So you've got beautiful watercolors of beautiful naked women, and you couple that with a shit ton of testosterone driven commentary from a very elevated intellect, and there is a lot to fucking like. So definitely go check them out over at opiumtales.com. And besides that, Roman's one of my oldest and dearest friends, so it's a great thing, man. It's a really great thing. Also, my Viking brothers at Nordic Smoke Barbecue, the only legit barbecue in the Inland Northwest, period, end of statement, done. I don't want to hear anything, that you are, it's a free country. You're entitled to disagree with me, but you would be abjectly fucking wrong. Nordic Smoke is one of a kind, and as a guy who's coming from Carolina by way of Texas, I am not easily impressed by fucking barbecue. They are fucking amazing. The only legit barbecue in the Inland Northwest. They are out there with the Viking Longship, the smoker truck. They handle catering. They smoke holiday birds. So if you got an occasion coming up, check them out on social media. They're on all the major platforms. That is Nordic Smoke Barbecue. Casey and Dusty Tellison. And let's all give a big shout out for Casey, because Casey is on the ass end of finishing up law school. I have no doubts that he is going to pass the bar with flying colors. It's going to be incredible. And if you are looking for a last minute, slightly post Christmas gift, check out the book Freaks of a Feather. It is Casey's memoir of his journey as a combat Marine, saw gunner, machine gunner. And it's a dark walk on that inner landscape, but it's incredibly well written. You definitely want to check that out. So anyway, Nordic Smoke Barbecue, friends of myself, friends of the program for a long time. Opiumtales.com, friends of myself, friends of the program for a very long time. It's good to keep that tight circle because everybody is family, and those family ties aren't always genetic. They're not always by blood. Sometimes it is by people's actions. Sometimes it is by the track record and the way that people treat you. Family is something that you can choose. That old adage about, we don't get to choose family. Well, yes, we fucking do. We don't get to choose our gene pool, but the people that we embrace as our brothers, as our sisters, as our surrogate fathers and mothers sometimes. That is something that we do have a choice about. So make good choices. I have been exceedingly blessed to be surrounded by the people with whom I have interacted and been surrounded and moved within those particular circles. The gods are the the gods favor me in a lot of ways with regard to that. I've been very fortunate to have crossed paths with some very, very great people and to have a lot of them uh, stick around for the long haul. So, all of you, you know who you are, and thank you for being here. I appreciate it. We are going to knock out, as we always do. We are going to kick things off with, let me adjust my production screen here. We are going to kick things off with the ever popular Ryan's Rabbit Hole segment. Ryan is on board. He is out there in the field. He is working on Christmas. Everybody send your best wishes and good energy out there to my brother Ryan, who is out there running cranes in the field on Christmas. No rest for the wicked. One of the things that Ryan and I bonded over early is that we are both repositories of useless information. Murder to play a game of Trivial Pursuit with, but always fascinating in conversation. And when two people of a like mind like that get together for a conversation, it's going to be cool to even be a fucking bystander, let me tell you that. But Ryan's Rabbit Hole segment has it's been a popular segment pretty much since we introduced it. We kind of introduced it as a one-off, we didn't even plan for it to be a segment, but we threw it out there and we got a lot of response. We're like, hey man, this is pretty cool. So we kick off the show. It's the first segment we cover with every show. It's just a little poke into your bread oven, some information that you may or may not have been aware of before. A particular historical item or a particular historical figure or a text or a project or just something that might have slid under your radar, right? And some weeks we go historical, some weeks we go conspiratorial, some weeks we go esoteric. Ryan's always got me on the esoteric, man, because, yeah, he makes me work for it there, definitely. This week it's historical-ish. Because it is a really obscure a really obscure little chunk of history, particularly down on the Gulf Coast. But it's not the kind of history that you would find even in an unconventional history book, unless you happen to be one of those people who's just really down with looking into the history of serial killers. Serial killer chic became a thing, in my recollection, right at the end of the 80s, early 90s. It started becoming a thing. Like before, it was something you would see on a Geraldo special, or just maybe a documentary that they would do about this stuff. But suddenly, serial killers became like a thing. That they, with the trading cards and the, and the biographies that were coming out and things like that. But even among the serial killer crowd, there's stuff that slides under the radar. Like we all know John Wayne Gacy. We all know Richard Ramirez. We all know, but people generally don't know about Grandpa Fish. People don't know about Albert Fish until you really kind of do a little bit deeper dive. People don't know about Charlie Starkweather. People might not know about Richard Speck, until you do a little deeper. But no matter how deep you dive, you are probably not going to find the Axeman of New Orleans in your set of serial killer trading cards. And it wasn't just because he was never specifically identified and apprehended, because I mean, hell, the Zodiac killer was never specifically identified and apprehended. Um, but it's pretty obscure. But the nature of his crimes were pretty fucking fascinating. We're looking at the World War One era, right around 1918. So it's a lot of. It's easy for a story even of that magnitude, and even in New Orleans, where the murders took place, largely, for it to get buried. Because look what else you had going on right there. You had World War One, right? Horrible fucking war. Um, by the way, real quick sidebar: Netflix, their reboot of All Quiet on the Western Front. Holy fuck, that is a must see. You have got to check it out, and it's I warn you ahead of time. It's dark. Anyway, World War One going on. You have the Spanish flu. You know, back when it was still okay to call something by a country's name, even though in that case it turned out not to be accurate. You can still use the country of origin to name a disease. But you know, the Spanish flu was really fucking horrible going on. But around the same time frame, you had a fellow in the New Orleans area who was breaking into homes and killing people with axes. Now, that seems not particularly noteworthy. He would typically use a chisel to get the hinges off the door to the home. He would almost always come in through the back door, and the axe that he used to kill these people um, was more often than not in the house when he arrived. That just happened to be his weapon of choice. He didn't bring an axe with him, but whenever there was an axe available in the house, he would chop them to pieces with their own fucking axe. Now, none of these murders were motivated by robbery. That's another thing that makes it unusual. No articles were ever stolen from the victims' houses. Um, there was a lot of speculation owing to the ethnic diversity of New Orleans at the time that it may be racially motivated because of because of the race of the race of the victims. Um, he would there was also a suggestion that he was specifically seeking out female victims, and that he would only murder the men when they got in the way of him murdering or sexually assaulting a female. Here's the weird part. Um, jazz. What? Jazz? How do we get from axe murders to jazz? Um, if there was jazz music playing in the house, it was almost like the lamb's blood over the doors in fucking Passover. Even if the house was successfully broken into, if there was jazz music in the house, if you wanted to live, you better find some fucking jazz and put it on. Find some jazz and put it on, because I'm going to chop you to pieces with this axe that I found in your very own house, unless you got some jazz music. Weird. Very, very bizarre fucking methodologies, and particularly in a city like New Orleans, which is known for its jazz. So I have pulled up, there were several correspondences and letters that he left to the police at the scene of murders. And I'm going to read this to you. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I want to breeze through that. Uh, okay. This was March 13th, 1919, and this was given to the newspapers. He said that he would kill again at 15 minutes past midnight, but would spare any occupants where jazz was being played. So when this happened, because he had such a track record, he put this letter to the newspapers, and he said that there would be murders at 15 minutes past midnight unless there was jazz playing. And on the night in question, every single jazz club in the city of New Orleans was filled to capacity and playing jazz music. And I'm just gonna throw a little bit out from this letter that was sent to the. Hell, it was addressed from hell, March 13th, 1919. Esteemed mortal. This is his lead. Not to whom it may concern. Esteemed mortal. They have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether that surrounds your earth. This guy, bit of a wordsmith, on top of being a jazz-loving axe murderer. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims. I alone know whom they shall be. I shall leave no clue except my bloody axe, besmeared with blood and brains of he who I have sent below to keep me company. This is some dark shit, man. Pretty fucking heavy. Here we go. Let me see. This is classic. Undoubtedly, you Orleanians think of me as the most horrible murderer, which I am. But I could be much worse if I wanted to. If I wished, I could pay a visit to your city every night. At will, I could slay thousands of your best citizens, for I am in close relationship with the angel of death. Do I have your attention yet? Are you fascinated? Because this is a rabbit hole you're going to want to be down. Now, to be exact, at 12:15, in parentheses, earthly time, on next Tuesday night, I am going to pass over New Orleans, hence the biblical reference to the lamb's blood during Passover. I am going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I am going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well then, so much the better for you people. One thing is certain, and that is some of your people who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe. Pretty fucking fascinating character, man. Well, as I am cold and crave the warmth of my native Tartarus, dude, go find it. Go down this rabbit hole. Read the guy's fucking letters. This is, dude, it's super heavy. And there are 1,000,001 theories and 1,000,001 suspects. Some of this stuff comes down to the last, the surviving widow of the last victim wound up shooting a guy in Los Angeles several years later, and it's thought that she had been tracking him down. She finally found the guy, but there's 1,000,001 theories of who it was and what his MO was and what his motivation was. But, dude, just the text of that letter, that is some fascinating shit. And maybe you don't even like jazz. But is he the Axeman of New Orleans, or is he the Jazz Man of New Orleans? No, he is the Axeman of New Orleans. And even you guys who are out there that do have a fascination and a love for jazz music, or a fascination with serial killers, even you guys are that are out there that have a copy of Blood Letters and Bad Men on your shelf, or have one of the original first edition sets of the serial killer trading cards, which, by the way, I could have acquired one for myself. I did acquire a set and gifted it to someone for Christmas in 1989, I believe it was. I looked up the market value on that, and fuck, I should have hung on to it, or at least gotten myself an extra set. Anyway, you're not going to find the Axeman of New Orleans in that set of serial killer trading cards. This is some fascinating shit, and definitely well worth the read. So, the Axeman of New Orleans, that is your search term. That is Ryan's rabbit hole for the week, and go. Get on it, man. Some really, really fascinating stuff. Joey, I'm out. Catch you later. Kids, be good. If you're naughty, be good at it. Right on, man. Luck to you, Mr. Bowles. Hope for the best possible outcome. Wait a minute. What did I miss? G-Dub. Oh, shit. Just got back from the hospital. Mom is in again. They still can't identify the infection in her back. DNA testing this week on her. But they say COVID vax had nothing to do with it. Well, of course they said that. Brother G-Dub, I wish you the best, man. Prayers out to you for the best possible outcome on that. And do me a favor, you got my contact information. Keep me posted by direct message. Let me know how that is. Let me know how that's shaping up. And thank you for coming out for that. Um, to the rabbit hole. Oh, cool. A ghost tour for the Axeman of New Orleans. We did a ghost tour. You did a ghost tour of Galveston. Roman, my buddy Josh Vargas, who put me in that horror film, Hair Metal Shotgun Zombie Massacre. Josh Vargas, my bro from way back. He owns a company that does those ghost tours down in Galveston. He spent a long time getting that business going on the side as a hustle, and it has turned out really well for him. So I'm gonna assume, since you mentioned it, I'm gonna assume that it was a pretty cool little excursion, that you enjoyed your time doing that little ghost tour. So cool on that. Sorry guys, I need the caffeine. You know, holidays are always like really hectic. This one has been as uneventful and unhectic and drama free as possible. I'm going to get more into that at the end of the program, where we get into reflections on the true meaning of the season, and how we go through and how we cope, and how we find meaning in the madness. So first story I want to cover, again, we are acknowledging this stuff. We are not going we're not going to beat it to death. We're acknowledging these things because we have to keep our eyes open, and because it is in my nature, regardless of anything else, to stay on top of things politically and socially. Yes, I'm trying to move away from just the griping. Yes, I'm trying to make it. I'm trying to take it in a direction that's more affirmational than confrontational. But you have to look at this stuff. Otherwise, I'm not who I am. And I know you guys count on me for some of this stuff. Ran into those guys when I worked in the Magic Cauldron. Yep, right on. So first of all, first thing I wanted to cover, a lot more has come out about the FBI's involvement. We all know that lefties would not know a principled argument if it bit them in their sanctimonious asses. We know this. This is not something that's even open for discussion, or would even need to be discussed. But the depth here is something to behold. We know that they quite correctly lamented COINTELPRO when that was going on during the 1960s, and the infiltration of black radical groups and Latino radical groups and indigenous American radical groups. The FBI had their tentacles in all of that, and they had infiltrated these organizations under the auspices of an operation known as COINTELPRO, their counterintelligence program. They fomented unrest inside these groups and created infighting. They were particularly successful with the Black Power movement in hanging snitch jackets on people and getting them to kill each other off. They were particularly successful with that phase of the operation in the Black Power movement. Other methods were more successful among other demographics. At the end of the day, mainstream media at the time and politicians clearly, and the FBI themselves clearly, because they had something to cover, referred to this as just insane conspiracy theory. And every college liberal, every hardcore leftist at the time was ridiculed as a conspiracy theorist for thinking that the FBI would even have the capability, let alone the will, to undertake such an operation against the American people. Well, now that is all, yep, right. Hey, good heads up, biker gangs too. That is true. Now that that's all been declassified, we all know the stuff that went on during COINTELPRO, and some of that stuff is fucking shocking. And they did make use of private companies under the counterintelligence program to do things that they would not have been allowed to do constitutionally. But again, history repeating itself now, only the shoe's on the other foot. The left is in total control. Left, right, or indifferent, doesn't matter. They are all working for the interests of the all powerful state, the deep state, as it were. And now they are attacking right wing groups, and you can expect that campaign is going to continue for the foreseeable future, if not generations, for as long as they pose the biggest existential threat to the state itself. But predictably, they are treating it like a conspiracy theory. Everything that has come out in the Twitter files, Barry Weiss and Matt Taibbi have been on top of it. They have been keeping it out there. None of the mainstream media will talk about it except to dismiss it as a conspiracy theory. Everything is a conspiracy theory. Everything is tinfoil hat until it's declassified. We find out now that they are not, that they have not relegated their operations to Twitter from the very, very beginning. But this is the way that it's being addressed, both by the Google algorithm, by the mainstream press. I entered a Google search, FBI Twitter. That was it. No quotation marks, nothing. FBI Twitter. 2 words, entered that. Top stories, Fox News. FBI declines to list other social media companies it paid. Says $3.5 million Twitter payment was reimbursement. But it doesn't matter because it's all a conspiracy theory. CNN, no directive. FBI agents, tech executives deny government ordered Twitter to suppress Hunter Biden's story. Even though that was clearly outlined in emails that were part of the Twitter files, they are lying. This isn't, well, he said, she said, but they said, these said. No, they're lying, point blank. New York Post, the latest Twitter file shows CIA, FBI have spent years meddling in content moderation. And then Newsweek running cover, did the FBI pay Twitter to censor content as Elon Musk claims? Right? And the quote-unquote fact checkers are pulling their fucking hair out because there's only so many ways you can spin this. Again, part of the fact checking that the 3.5 million, because they can't deny that the FBI paid $3.5 million to Twitter. They cannot deny that 3.5 million was paid. So now they're saying, no, it wasn't for you to go and censor stuff. It was as a reimbursement for you going and censoring stuff. We didn't pay you 3.5 million to bury this story. We paid the 3.5 million as a reimbursement after you had buried this story. See, therefore the fact checker can rate it false. Are we up to date? Are we tracking, Sparky? We understand how propaganda works. All I entered in Google was FBI Twitter. Those were the first 4 news results that popped up. There are more. Twitter Files 9, vast web of coordination between tech giant and CIA. So it's not just the FBI, the CIA are involved. Now, a lot of us, we have known as conservatives, we have known for years, and we have lamented and publicly shrieked about it, that we were getting shadow banned. We knew that conservative speakers and conservative ideas were being deliberately suppressed. We have known this. It is no secret. But the fact that the FBI, and now as we're finding out, the CIA, were directly involved and not ordering, but suggesting and reimbursing millions of dollars to these companies. Now that we know that is going on, now we're into some next level shit. Something that I personally lamented from years ago. If you guys are familiar with the Southern Poverty Law Center, Mark Potok, Morris Dees, their entire business model is finding Nazis under every bed. That is how they have made their money, and they have made lots of it over the years. Mark Potok is the guy who was regularly floated for years and years and years. Whenever the topic of right-wing extremism or the militia movement came up, Potok would be the guy that the mainstream propaganda, deep state press, Potok would be the guy they'd put out there to go, here is our resident expert on right-wing extremism. He is not an expert on right-wing extremism. He is a shill. He is a fearmonger. That is his business model. But that is how he was treated. So when he goes out with his worst-case scenario shit, which is ultimately based on nothing, he is called an expert by CNN or NBC or whoever, and thus, getting back to what did we discuss in the opener, perception, reality. You have controlled the perception. Now the perception of this man is as if he were some authority on right-wing extremist behavior. The larger point with the Southern Poverty Law Center is the FBI could only go so far in its infiltration of quote-unquote right-wing extremist or quote-unquote white supremacist groups. There were some things that the FBI could not do because there were constitutional issues involved. So what did the FBI choose to do about that? How did they handle it? They got the Southern Poverty Law Center to do the work for them. The merger of government and corporate power. What did Mussolini call that? Starts with an F. Help me out. But I'm not going to play into that we're not fascist, you're fascist thing. This is left-wing control. This is... it's authoritarian. We're not going to play the fascism, communism game. It's authoritarian. It is deep state authoritarian. With Southern Poverty Law Center, they used a private company to infiltrate these groups in ways that the government would not have been allowed to do. That's how they worked around the Constitution, which is there to protect us. They did the same thing with Twitter verified, to the tune of, we know they paid them at least $3.5 million to get certain groups, certain individuals, and certain stories shut down. There is no denying that now. There is no, you can spin it 6 ways from Sunday, but it is an undeniable fact that Twitter was paid $3.5 million by the Federal Bureau of Investigation specifically to suppress speakers, groups, and more importantly, ideas, but most importantly, specific stories. The Hunter Biden laptop being the most prominent and most egregious example. Our president is compromised. Fact. Hunter Biden used his father's political stroke to broker deals with Chinese financiers and was flown on a presidential aircraft to China with his father specifically for that purpose. Fact. The same CIA that instituted and instigated, rather, the Maidan Revolution, that ousted a democratically elected leader of Ukraine and installed Poroshenko, and later installed Zelensky, this coked up clown who is running the show now, fact, his son was placed on the board of directors at Burisma, Ukraine's biggest oil and gas company, making 50+ thousand a month, despite having no experience in oil and gas, no experience in international finance, and no experience in Ukraine. Fact. There are people with whom I cannot carry on these discussions anymore. Not that I couldn't. People with whom I refuse to carry on these discussions because there is no saving them. They are long past the point of no return. If you have not seen the writing on the wall by now, it's another reason I'm taking a different direction with the sermons now. Bart, you're preaching to the choir. Yes, I know I'm preaching to the choir. Because anybody that's not inside the church right now, I'm locking them out. They literally can't be saved. They can't. The nature of it is so fucking transparent and so fucking obvious that if you cannot acknowledge it at this point, it is a deliberate, willful ignorance. That is something that I will not abide. Very few things will take me from 0 to 100 that quick. Among them, willful ignorance, but beyond that, condescending to me, we're going to scrap. Gaslighting me, we're definitely going to scrap. And that is essentially what's going on here, what's been going on here for some time. Just colossal, Olympic level fucking gaslighting. People who either buy into the narrative or even worse, repeat and regurgitate that narrative. I break no bread with, and I spare no time for. I knew what you meant, Roman. I knew. Some of them are very close to me genetically, and I may love them as one does, but I acknowledge the fact that they cannot be saved because it's willful ignorance at this point. But now we are finding out that it wasn't limited to Twitter, that it wasn't limited to the FBI. And we don't know how many agents from how many agencies, from how many countries were involved. Part of the things that got dumped in the Twitter files included the fact that we had former agents of foreign intelligence services working for Twitter. So this is an international thing. So it stands to reason that the CIA would be involved because they've got to handle the foreign elements of this thing, assuming anyone is going within the confines of constitutional protocols anymore, and that is not a safe assumption. This is where we are, people. What did they always hide behind? My private company. Oh, it's a private company, man. Oh, you think Twitter's shadow banning you? Well, first of all, you're a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. Second of all, doesn't matter, because even if they're a private company, they can do what they want. And if you don't like the way they do it, go build your own Twitter, man. Which they tried to do with Parler. And what happened? Amazon shut them down. This is very specifically about shutting down and deplatforming one side of the debate. They know that their ideas cannot stand in a free and open marketplace of ideas, so you make the other guy shut up. If you don't like it, go build your own Twitter. And you know what Elon Musk said? He said, no, I don't think I'm going to build my own Twitter. I think I'm going to buy yours. And he did. And suddenly, the they're a private company, they can do what they want crowd has changed their tune again because they would not know a principled argument if it bit them in the ass. How do we segue from one thing to another? Well, what is the number one? So that's where we're at on the censorship front. This regime, and it doesn't matter. Yes, it happens to be a Democrat running the show right now, but it was no different when George W. Bush and his police state ambitions were running the show. It was exactly the same. They just didn't have as many social media platforms. It wasn't as big a factor in our lives, as pervasive and insidious as it is now. But he had the same motivations and attempted to do essentially the same things as far as shutting down anything that went outside the mainstream narrative. It's terrifying. They know that they are limited by this brilliant document that the founders gave us. One of the greatest gifts that's ever been bestowed on Western civilization, the United States Constitution. They know that they are limited. So they find ways around it. They have always managed to find ways around it. They've been incredibly successful in doing so. And whenever the rare occasion emerges where they do get caught, it doesn't matter. They're still holding all the cards. They've still got all the fucking stroke. They can wordsmith their way around 100 different things. One of the leading news hits that I got from my FBI Twitter Google search. FBI response to Twitter Files disclosures said it didn't request any action on specific tweets. And then you scroll down and they have emails where they requested specific action on specific tweets, specific groups. They're caught. They're in damage control mode heavy as hell right now. Fox is talking about it, but even Fox won't dig too deep. No one there besides Tucker. They won't dig too deep. Caitlin Johnstone had a good article with regard to that this week, and I run hot and cold on Caitlin. I don't have her pulled up here as a bullet point, but this just popped into my head while I was talking about it. She had an excellent point that Tucker Carlson is the new Alex Jones, but not in the way that you think. Alex Jones would be the only person talking about a particular item that the deep state would rather not address. And so he became the whipping boy. He's the insane person. He's the tinfoil hat guy. And now Tucker Carlson has stepped into that role. Not because Tucker Carlson is a nut job in the way that Alex Jones was. Don't get me wrong, I love Alex, but, nut job. Carlson is way more savvy, way more articulate, way more balanced. But he's essentially, what did we say at the beginning? What did they have us chasing? What did Mencken talk about? What did Mencken talk about? The hobgoblins, the endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary. Tucker is the new hobgoblin because they booted Alex Jones off the platforms and everybody cheered. Without the ability to speak, without the ability to communicate, without the ability to articulate things, we've lost it all. That is why I will continue to make an issue out of it. Even if I am that lone voice in the wilderness, even if it's just me standing up on a flatbed pickup truck with a bullhorn screaming at bystanders. I'm a private company, they can do what they want. Yes, but when that thing that they want to do, when that want is motivated by a $3.5 million payout, and when the thing that they are doing is deliberately suppressing stories, valid news stories, factual statements, factual observations, when they are suppressing this at the behest of the government. Then, for all intents and purposes, they are acting as a government entity. There is legal backing to this idea. There is legal backing to this theory. And ultimately, and I'm praying again, I lost a little bit of my reluctant optimism after the midterms. I remain convinced that we are past the tipping point. I remain convinced that at the very least the population is seeing the light in larger and larger numbers. I remain convinced that there are enough men of principle in the Republican Party that are willing to take this fight as far as it needs to go. I remain convinced of these things. But these revelations even rocked me a little bit. And you guys know that I've been on this shit for fucking years. The depth with which they were able to penetrate this private company, the success and the effectiveness with which they were able to shut down legitimate news stories, that one even caught me by surprise. And then finding out the number of actual foreign intelligence agents that were employed. And again, this is one platform. Do you want to know why they were so terrified that Musk was going to take over? Had nothing to do with hate speech, had nothing to do with even free speech, that he was going to let people fucking say. The reason why people were so goddamn afraid is because they knew they hadn't covered the tracks well enough, that the traces were still going to be there, that Musk was going to be able to bring the receipts. They have been spying on you. They have been hiding things from you. They have been censoring you. And now we have proof. Oopsie. You're spin doctoring the fuck out of it. I remain guardedly optimistic. I don't think it's going to work. At the very least, you have Rand Paul. But you got a number of people like him in the House. You have a number of people like him in the Senate. And though we don't control the Senate, House has the power of the purse. And those House committees have the power to launch investigations. Impeachments begin in the House. Again, we're back to the same fucking place we found ourselves with Trump, that they found themselves, rather, with Trump. They can impeach, but there will be no conviction. They can impeach, but no one will be removed from office. But the bigger we paint that picture, the more minds are reached. The bigger we ring the bell, the more dogs salivate. Getting back to the psychology analogy that we drew earlier. Control the stimulus, you control the response. We're ringing that fucking bell. And that's something to goddamn feel good about. But what was the main story that they suppressed? Hunter Biden's laptop. What do we know about Hunter Biden? Well, we know just from what I discussed in the past 20 minutes that he was appointed after the Maidan revolution that the CIA instigated, that he was put to work for Burisma, Ukraine's #1 oil and gas company, making 50,000+ a month, despite having no experience in any of the fields, no experience in oil and gas, no experience in international finance, no experience in Ukraine. How the hell did he get appointed? Wow, I'm sure it couldn't have had anything to do with his VP father. Of course it did. His VP father, God damn it, I'm going to pull this up again because, you know, people... I'm going to pull this up again. And they continue to fucking fact check this. I'm going to run it. I'm going to run it again, guys, and just listen close, Because they continue to say, and the fact checkers continue to say, that this never happened, that he didn't brag about it. This is Biden in his own words. He appoints his son, gets his son appointed to the board at Burisma. A Ukrainian prosecutor, one of the three honest men remaining in Ukraine, is investigating Burisma for corruption. Biden, at the time, was vice president. He held the purse strings on $1 billion in loan guarantees to Ukraine. But there was a Ukrainian prosecutor who was investigating the company that had just been cajoled into hiring his son. And this is what he had to say about it. I'm going to play this again. This is Biden in his own fucking words. Fast forward to get to the point. And here we go.
I remember going over convincing our team or others to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to the press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Son of a bitch, he got fired. And they put in someone who was solid. This is Biden in his own words, speaking in front of, oh, wait for it, tinfoil hat people, the Council on Foreign Relations. Bragging that he got a prosecutor fired who was trying to investigate Burisma. Ukraine is widely known, renowned even, for being the most corrupt country on that fucking continent. Now the corruption extends overseas, all the way to the top level of the White House. And you don't think that cadaver is compromised? Why am I saying all this? To get back to the Hunter Biden laptop story, specifically squashed by Twitter, specifically squashed by other social media platforms. Deliberate censorship. Why would they try to shut that down? Well, because there are criminal penalties for the stuff that went on there. Criminal penalties. So far, nobody's been prosecuted, and since the Republicans do not control both houses, no one's going to get ousted. That is the sad reality of it. But a lot more people are going to have it goddamn brought to their attention, and I'll roll with that. Disturbing as that is, they suppressed that. Other social media companies have suppressed some of the things that are in the omnibus spending bill. We are being lied to across the board. The regime insists that, look, right there in the bill, there's X billion dollars for Border Patrol. And then you look further in, and the clause says that none of this can be spent for actual improvements in border control. Yes, they provided money, but you cannot use it for a wall, you cannot use it for cameras, you cannot use it for security drones, you cannot use it for tightening things down. No, that money was specifically spent for processing, making it quicker and easier for illegals to get in. Meanwhile, We spent billions overseas, wait for it, helping countries like Oman secure their borders. This is both parties, folks. Not everybody in both parties. There are a hell of a lot more devout constitutionalists on the Republican side than there are on the Democratic side. How do I know this? Because none exist on the Democratic side. None. I said what I fucking said. They're holding it down. People like Rand Paul standing in the gap. Good on him. But in the meantime, that money just keeps rolling out the door, doesn't it? And buried in that bill, bringing it back around, another $50 billion in spending for this guy. $50 billion. We have people starving here in the United States. We have energy markets that are fluctuating all over the place. We have people who aren't able to have a festive Christmas, and we are spending $50 billion on Ukraine. Why? Why? The fuck do they possibly have to offer us? That was all put into the omnibus spending bill. I'll go ahead and close that window, because I think I've done about enough whipping of a dead horse as far as that goes. But from the Hill, 5 highlights from the $1.7 trillion. That's trillion with a T. 1.7 trillion spent. Here are some highlights. $773 billion toward non-defense discretionary spending. An electoral count reform act. Measure reforms the 1887 Electoral Count Act to clarify that the Vice President cannot overturn election results when Congress counts Electoral College votes, and raises the number of members necessary to raise objections to the state electors. You understand what that's about. They are setting the stage for no one being able to object, no matter how big the malfeasance is. This from Business Insider. Most House members didn't show up in person to vote on a $1.7 trillion government spending bill. None of them read it. You remember this picture. That was the bill. That's Rand Paul standing behind it. That was the bill. So you know goddamn well not a single member read it. But as it turns out, not only did they not read it, but the majority of House members did not show up in person to vote on it. They couldn't be bothered. They couldn't be bothered to show up in person to vote on a $1.7 trillion giveaway of your money. Actually, that's not accurate. It's not even your money anymore. Are they going to tax you over it? Bet your ass they will. But they're not spending your money or mine. They're printing it out of thin air. Ultimately, this is not sustainable. Ultimately, all debts are paid. Either the debtor pays the bill or the lender pays the bill, but ultimately all debts are paid. Politico, $1.7 trillion bill sent for Biden. Omnibus spending bill. Let's try this. Waste Watch. Here we go. just some of the things that are in the bill. $3.6 million for a hiking trail named after Michelle Obama. $3.6 million. $200 million for gender equity programs, including those in other countries. Tucked on page 3,128 of the 4,700-page bill is a provision that says federal dollars cannot be used to purchase, procure, or distribute pipes or cylindrical objects intended to be used to smoke or inhale illegal scheduled substances. Do you want to know why they had to include that? Because it was only a year ago where they were talking about giving away smoker kits. They were going to give away crack pipes to crack addicts. That was debunked and fact-checked. And then they spun right around, and it turns out the fact checkers couldn't even spin it. That was actually a thing. They had to pass a bill to prevent that from being spent. So if anything good did come out of this, it's that. The provision, based on a law from Marco Rubio, the Biden administration earlier this year canceled its plans to distribute $30 million in grants to Organization for Smoking Kits, including crack pipes. Rubio tried to pass a bill banning that. Democrats wouldn't allow it time on the floor to vote. But that's not the end of the waste. Billions in border control for other countries. I'm trying to find some text here. Again, this is just something that I'm searching on the fly. Again, just pulling you into the moment. You know, this is, when I say live, we're rolling with it. This is just like you sitting here in a cafe having a conversation with me. Washington Examiner, 12 woke expenditures in this bill. 1.2 million for LGBTQ pride centers. 1.2 million for pride centers. Another 1.2 million support services for DACA recipients. You know, the DREAM Act. 1.2 million in support for them. $477,000 to the Equity Institute in Rhode Island to indoctrinate teachers with anti-racism virtual labs. $1 million for Zora's House. Who the fuck is Zora? Zora's House is a facility in Ohio, a co-working and community space for women and gender-expansive people of color. They get $1 million. $3 million for the American LGBTQIA plus handshake Z. $3 million for the American Gay Museum in New York City. $3 million. $3.6 million, as I said before, for a Michelle Obama trail in Georgia. $750,000 for LGBT and gender non-conforming housing in Albany, New York. $2 million for MLK Labor in Washington, an affiliate of the AFL-CIO that expelled Seattle police officers from its union ranks. They're getting $2 million. $956,000 for the Equity Incubator at the Universities of Shady Grove in Maryland. And $791,000 for equitable energy resilience and EV infrastructure in Sonoma, California. Now, this is just 12 examples. This bill is 4,700 pages long. You do the math. Literally do the math. They beat us with that and then dumped the Zelensky speech on us. We are at a point now. I want you to ponder this. This butcher, regardless of what you may think about Vladimir Putin, If you legit believe that the invasion of Ukraine was unprovoked, you are a grazer beyond redemption. You're an idiot. Point fucking blank. If that short dick's every cannibal on the Congo and hair lifts every hillbilly on Bear Creek, I am all about it. I will stand behind that. The only problem I have with Putin's actions is that he didn't do it in 2014 right after Crimea. He should have annexed the entire fucking region. He waited. And here we are. To the ethnic Russians still being massacred in Donbas, except in areas with the Russians now control. To the people who for 8 years were massacred, the ethnic Russians who were massacred for 8 years. While we tried to make Ukraine a member of NATO so we could put missiles in Putin's backyard, Putin is in the right. If you have a problem with me making such a statement, let the doorknob hit you where the good Lord splits you, Sparky. If you're waiting around for me to apologize for that sentiment, I hope you packed a fucking lunch. This man does not even have support within his own country anymore. This man, we are told we are over there. Why are we giving him $100 billion to defend democracy? This man has outlawed all opposition parties. This man has censored any criticism of him on terrestrial radio and any other platform within Ukraine. Elon Musk gave Starlink systems at the beginning of this conflict, gave Starlink systems to Ukraine. The first thing that Zelensky asked for was the ability to censor and shut down specific things on that Starlink platform. Elon refused. I wasn't thrilled with him giving them the Starlink in the first fucking place, but Elon refused to give them the abilities for censorship. This is what it is to be principled. This motherfucker and the people that support him have no idea what a principle or a principled argument is. It is not a democracy when you have outlawed, since we're talking about LGBTQIA plus, /J/6 rights. And since they're constantly berating Putin for his policies against the gay community, why don't you do a deep dive on how gays and lesbians are treated in Ukraine? Why don't you take a deep dive on how trans people are treated in Ukraine? They'd pray to be in fucking Russia right now. So spare me the moral high ground. You have none. Spare me the fight for democracy, because it's not a democracy. It's not a representative republic. Zelensky is a dictator. More authoritarian than Papa Vlad next door. Say what you want about Vladimir Putin. Is he authoritarian? Certainly, without reservation. But Zelensky isn't even pretending. He's openly flaunting it in the face of fucking people. He has shut down and outlawed all opposition parties. Is that the act of a democracy? He has shut down, by law, all opposition on radio and television and social media platforms. Is that a democracy? And now, as I spoke of a couple of weeks ago, they are sending soldiers into churches and monasteries for the Orthodox Church, because the church, in Zelensky's eyes, and in ours, since we're pulling the purse strings, the churches aren't supportive enough of Ukraine and her war. Let me say that again. This maggot sends soldiers into churches and monasteries because the church doesn't support him enough. Is that the act of a democracy? $100 billion plus. $100 billion plus, and you note that he's dressed like a fucking Uber driver. No, he's not dressed like an Uber driver. He's dressed in military green, trying to project a military air, as he does in all his photo ops where he's dressed in fucking military body armor. This is stage managed, people. What did we talk about? You control the perception, you control people's reality, and they are controlling that perception in spades. And the fact that both sides supposedly it was a surprise visit that nobody knew. Nobody knew about this joint session of Congress. Really? We can't get a joint session of Congress together with a month's notice to get everybody in one room to vote on this omnibus spending bill. But allegedly, we didn't know Zelensky was coming until an hour before. And yet, we've got a joint session of both houses of Congress in a packed fucking house. How transparent does a lie have to be before you call it what it is? The power of propaganda is fucking astounding. It is absolutely fucking astounding. And it's effective. Very effective. What did Mencken say? Take a good look. They are quite incapable of weighing ideas or even of comprehending any, save the most elemental men whose whole thinking is done in terms of emotion and whose dominant emotion is dread of what they cannot understand. They can't understand the historical complexities of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. They don't know about Nikita's gift in 1953. They don't know about the Azov Battalion or the Tornado Battalion. They don't know about the history of Nazis in the Ukraine. They don't know about Stepan Bandera. They don't know, and most of them couldn't find Ukraine on an unmarked map. So yes, they are ignorant. They are making their decisions based on emotions. How do we control their emotions? We control their perceptions. How do we control their perceptions? The glow box tells them what to think. This is all tying in. That's what makes this control, this deplatforming so fucking sinister. Because even if you do resort to the ballot box, and even assuming you could eliminate all the fraud, you can't. But even assuming we could, why do you need to force people if you control their thoughts? Why do you need to force people if you control their perceptions to the point where they have bought this insanely transparent, fallacious narrative? Am I telling you to shut up about it? No. I'm telling you not to engage people. There is no saving people who haven't seen it by now. I have members of my own family, my own blood relatives, that lamented at length my support for a murderous dictator, how much it disturbed them. My support for a murderous dictator. I'm not running any countries and I don't have billions of dollars to give. Who are you supporting? We're not going any deeper on that one. We're not. because at the end of the day, we have to make our own decisions. Another reason I don't want to go any further down that hole is because it's a waste of time, like we talked about at the beginning of the program. I'm not going to waste your time repeating stuff that you already know. When there's new developments, I'll get into that. Like all the new developments that got dumped because of the Twitter files this week. I'll go into that with you. But I'm not going to waste your time otherwise. There's literally no point. I'll acknowledge this speech and the fact that it got taken to a new level for that joint session next week, but I'm not going to beat it to death. We all know what time it is. We're being lied to. Propaganda ministry is doing its job, and it's incredibly effective. I remain convinced that we will rise above it. If not collectively, we will rise above it as individuals. And that's what I'm going to be closing with here in a bit. I want to get into this. I'm going to make a recommendation. I had planned to do several points on this and draw some parallels, draw some analogies, draw some comparisons, conclusions, and whatnot. Instead, I'm going to recommend this podcast series to you, and I will let you draw your own conclusions. Wondery does a series of podcasts. American Scandal, American History Tellers are just two of the ones that I have bookmarked that are on a steady feed to my iPod. American History Tellers just did a series, a 7-part series on the Civil War. Now, look, I'm going to let you know ahead of time, Wondery as a whole, and particularly American Scandal, more so than American History Tellers. American History Tellers plays it pretty close to the bone. American Scandal takes some liberties, and they definitely insert their politics into it. But American History Tellers, 7-part series on the Civil War, I've been listening to all week. Just finally finished it up. You're going to be amazed, I think, if you take the time to listen to this. And again, it's 7 45-minute to 1-hour installments. It's not something you can just put on as background noise if you really want to catch the depth of it and what they're really trying to relate. It's not something that you can listen to lightly. It's heavy. But I'm going to recommend that you do. As we march blithely toward what is looking like another civil war, and if not an outright civil war, enough of an internecine conflict. Internecine, that's my college word. I got like 3 of those. Enough of an internecine and factional conflict. Some would go so far as to say we're already in the early stages of it. If you take a good listen to this series and the way that it's presented, you're going to see a lot of parallels. The one thing that resonated with me is something that I've gone over sermon after sermon. About nuance. About how it's never as easy as right, left, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, black, white. It's never that simple. You can make generalizations, even broad generalizations, that are accurate. It is an accurate statement to say that there are a lot more unprincipled individuals representing the political left than the political right within the context of government. That is a factual statement. It's also a generalization, but I think you do the dive, you do the math, and you'll find out that it's largely accurate. You will find that if I make a broad generalization, say mainstream media is overwhelmingly left-leaning, if not outright leftist propaganda. That is a broad generalization. It's also a factually accurate statement. Sorry, Sparky, but there it is. Nuance is dead for purposes of public discussion. But as I have said, it's never that easy. That we need to appreciate the subtle nuances of it. And this series covers a lot of those nuances. About the fact that a number of people in the North opposed ending slavery. What? Was the war about slavery? Was it about states' rights? Blah, blah, blah. We can have that debate all day long. What I appreciated about this series was the nuances, the little known facts that really do make a big picture perspective considerably different than what you might have thought of. Large number of people in the North, particularly Irish laborers, did not want slavery to end in the South because they thought they would be competing with an influx of blacks coming up from the South who had been freed, and they were going to have to compete in the labor market with these people. They did not want it to happen. That and the fact that there was already racial tension. Lincoln nearly lost his second election specifically because of the Emancipation Proclamation. He lost support within his own fucking party. Well, yeah, because they were all white supremacists. Nah. There were definitely white supremacy overtones in that, but Lincoln himself, by definition, was a white supremacist. He freed the slaves. Go a little deeper. He did not free the slaves. The Emancipation Proclamation was an act of war. It was intended to create uprisings in the South where the slaves were. He had no force of law in the South. Emancipation Proclamation meant nothing. And I'm going to tell you something. Here's the thing. The Emancipation Law, the Emancipation Proclamation itself, the enforceable parts of it only applied to the South. The border states that still had slavery were not allowed to end it under federal law. They specifically continued to allow slavery in those border states that were loyal to the Union. Bet you didn't know that. Ton of little nuances like that. But the thing that kept coming back to me and the parallels that I was drawing was the nature of the way it's shaking out. That this time it will not be regional. This time it will be factional. It'll be somewhat regional. Okay, we can say that. It'll be somewhat regional. Texas will be an entity all of its own. If there is any secession, it will come from states like Texas and Florida, if there is. And I think ultimately we're not going to be able to avoid that. You're going to see geographical lines being redrawn. Not necessarily geographical lines, geographical boundaries. State lines are going to be reconstructed. You already have a move right now, a political push in Washington and Oregon, in the eastern parts of those two states, that want to break away and join Greater Idaho because they're tired of the insane policies coming out of Olympia, coming out of, and the numbers in Seattle and Olympia and Portland controlling what goes on in Washington and Oregon, when the biggest part of the state wants nothing to do with that California transplant maggot bullshit. I live here in the Northwest, and I'm telling you that east of the Cascades, Washington and Oregon are red states to the fucking core. The biggest areas here are made up of people who are hard conservative, self-reliant individuals, and we are at the mercy of a political machine that just recently with Tina Kotek getting elected, fucking Oregon, has demonstrated its capacity for fucking fraud. You have heard me say it before. Here in Washington State, all of our voting is by mail. All of it. They have very few provisions for people to actually vote in person. It is almost exclusively done by mail. They send ballots to your known address. Now, I have no indication, and I certainly don't have any empirical evidence to say that there was fraud in the Washington Senate election. There are a lot of inconsistencies. There are a lot of discrepancies that can't be easily accounted for. But here's the thing. Do I think that they have necessarily committed fraud here using those mail-in ballots and fucking with the numbers? I don't have any hard indication that they have. But how would I know? How would I know? The numbers clearly favor west of the Cascades because that's where all the people are. So if the majority of voters come down on a leftist side of a particular issue, it totally stands to reason because all of the people are on the left side, the left side of the state. That's where all the numbers are. If it comes down to it again, will it be regional? To a degree. That's basically what I'm saying. To a degree, it will be regional. You'll have state lines being withdrawn as eastern parts of this region go to join Idaho and Montana. That might become an autonomous region of its own. The Cascadian secession that I prayed so hard for so many years might wind up biting me in the ass because it'll be a secession of the coastal regions west of the Cascades and the coastal regions of British Columbia, which puts you in the same leftist politics that got us in the situation to fucking begin with. It is a really fascinating time to be alive, isn't it? But that series, American History Tellers, it's a 7-part series on the Civil War. It goes into a lot of those subtleties, a lot of those historical oopsies that even people who are devout history buffs that do have an interest in the Civil War era specifically, they might not know about this stuff. Some of the stuff I didn't know about. Some of the stuff you might not know about. So I offer that up to you, and I'm going to recommend that. Again, that is Wondery. You can find them on, I have them on iTunes because I still use these old fucking dinosaurs. But these old dinosaurs have been modded. You guys have heard me talk about that before. I got this thing modded. Found a guy online that replaced the shitty battery with a 3,000 milliamp hour battery, replaced the 120 gig spinning hard drive with a 256 gig solid state drive in one, and I've got a 512 gig solid state drive in another. And then I happened to find one of these old spec rubber armor cases for it, and I have rubber cases for all of my iPods. I've got 3 of these actually. Anyway, it's on iTunes, it's on Stitcher. I don't know where you get your podcasts, but Wondery, you can find it in the Wondery app as well. Some of Wondery's stuff is just mental masturbation. Some of their stuff is just pure entertainment, pure grazerness, for lack of a better word. But they've got some winners, and American History Tellers and largely American Scandal is a winner. But very specifically for purposes of this, American History Tellers, Wondery Podcast, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast, Wondery Podcasts, American History Tellers, 7-part series on the Civil War. And I want you guys to give it a listen, even if it takes you several days to get through it, as it did me. It took me several days to get through it. Give it a listen. And keep an open mind and be ready to reflect, because a lot of the things that happened, and a lot of the things that are in the early stages of happening now as we blithely stumble towards possibly a second civil conflict here in the States, is stuff you might not have seen coming. So keep those eyes open and check out that series for sure if you get a chance. Look, once again, I'm going to remind y'all, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on that is dark. There is a lot going on that, if you let it, will overwhelm you. But look what day it is today, people. It's fucking Christmas. Christmas is not an excuse to forget about the problems. Christmas is not an excuse to forget about the very real fact that there are people out there with sinister, malicious intent that seek to undermine all of the greatness that's been created by our betters. I'm talking about our forefathers, our ancestors, our founders. There are a lot of people out there that seek to undermine this stuff. A lot of people out there right now. There are many who don't have the Christmas spirit because they are feeling beaten down by everything that is going on. There are a number of people out there right now that are not feeling the Christmas spirit, because Christmas is a representation of a religious belief and a faith that is outside the state, because the state is their fucking religion. They pride themselves on being atheists. They pride themselves on how much smarter they are than us unwashed rabble, because they don't have a need for a religion. The state is their fucking religion. It is. Complete with its own priesthood. Father Fauci, the cult of fear, all of these things. We could get caught up in that and let their misery drag us in, particularly when coupled with our own legitimate grievances. We're in a fucked up economy. We're in a fucked up economy right now. Inflation, record levels. Gas prices just now starting to come down again, but still markedly above where they were before this cadaver in chief took over. Do I need to remind you? How often do you go to the grocery store? You people who actually manage your lives like adults and buy food. Don't live off of fucking road food. Don't eat out all the time. You guys that are actually doing household budgets. You guys that are actually, making that happen. How's your shit looking this week? How's your shit looking for the last several months? You're up against it. Because you're feeling the effects. What's the old saying? Those who don't learn from the past are condemned to repeat it. Those that do learn from the past are condemned to watch everybody else repeat it. A lot of us have learned from the past. But apparently 81 million people thought that a cadaver staggering around the Oval Office was a good idea. That's assuming you believe that there are legit 81 million, and for the record, I do not. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, let's open our brains really wide and play around with it for a minute. Up against it, people. It's rough. For me, personally, this is the first Christmas that I have not been able to hear my father's voice. A lot of people were not as fortunate as I was to have such an outstanding father and to have such a close relationship with him. And I lost him this year. This is the first Christmas that I haven't greeted the morning by calling to wish Papa Merry Christmas. Some of you guys are dealing with that. We have losses during the year. Things are not well. I'm not going to sit here and puff your pecker and fill you full of sunshine and unicorn farts and blow smoke up your ass. I'm not. Me taking a different direction does not equate to me ignoring, certainly, all the things that we are up against. But there are two things. There are two things that I ask of you. Two things that I expect of you, more to the point. Number one is to remember exactly how blessed we fucking are. In spite of everything that is going on. The crime rate spiking, the inflation, the border being out of control, the fentanyl, which also claimed another one of my friends who lost Austin Cost this year. A fentanyl overdose. All of the things that are going on. Remember that in spite of that, we still live in what is, for the moment, the healthiest patient on the cancer ward. The entire world is fucked up, but we live in an industrialized Western nation with ostensibly representative government. A representative constitutional republic. Our democracy is not under threat because we don't live in a democracy. Sorry, Sparky, for what your college professors told you. We live in a country where we are still, for the moment, allowed to openly criticize, to follow the great things that our founders left to us. The right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition our government for the redress of grievances. We live in a country that revolutionized revolutions in terms of industry, the Industrial Revolution. We are always the ones taking things one step further. Granted, over the last decade-ish, we used to be far and away, head and shoulders above everyone else, and we've gotten knocked down a few pegs. Largely because once upon a time, we revered men like Elon Musk. We looked up to guys like him as heroes. We looked up to guys like him as people who were advancing the goals, not only of this society in which we live, but our species, making the world better for everyone. We used to revere men like that. And we've lost that. As a result, we're getting knocked down a few pegs at a time. Thank God I live in a time where I'm able to share the planet with men like Elon Musk and see the things that can be. To see the things of which we are capable as a species. Not the majority of the herd and the rabble who can barely handle don't put the fork in the light socket, but there exist great men among us. I have great men in my circle. They might not be out there building electric cars and creating commercial space industries where none existed, but they are nevertheless great men. Combatives, practitioners, intellects, hard workers who do amazing things for their families. And all of this is taking place within the confines of a country where I can still go out and earn a living. Where a 51-year-old man can decide on one fucking phone call that, hey, my life isn't working out, I'm going to give it a year and I'm going to be something different and completely change the quality of his life. I am surrounded by men like Brother Ryan who can open doors like that and put his word on someone because I have that kind of trust and that kind of bond. You have friends out there like that, or I hope you do, and if not, you need to be cultivating them. But all of this is taking place within the confines of what is still the healthiest patient on the cancer ward. Do you realize, speaking of the Civil War in that series, do you realize what we have survived as a people and a nation? We were birthed into the world fighting impossible odds and the most powerful military machine on the planet at the time, and nobody thought we had a chance. That's how we were birthed into the international scene. The British invaded again in 1812. We fucking pushed them back. We have survived a massive economic depression and several not so massive but still kicking the nuts fucking economic depressions. We were a deciding factor. I'm very specific in my wording on that. We were a deciding factor in 2 world wars in the span of 1 fucking century. In the span of 4 years, we took a non-militarized, non-military industrialized country that had no idea what a war footing even looked like, turned our entire economy around, put it on that wartime footing, and beat back another of the most powerful military machines on the planet. With substantial help from Russians in the East. Okay, yes, I get that. Thank you. Thank you, voice in my head. But we were a factor, and look what we did as a nation. We didn't heed the words of great men. In the wake of that, we didn't heed the words of a great man like Dwight David Eisenhower. Yeah, but Ike, Mossadegh and Ike this and Ike, dude, heroic men have heroic flaws and heroic fuck ups. Ike was a great man, and he warned us about the military-industrial complex. We had built this machine up, and he, knowing what he knows about the military, was afraid of where it might head, and we did not heed his words, and we are suffering the consequences to this day. But you know what? We even survived that. And like that series I talked about earlier, we survived our own civil war. One of the bloodiest conflicts that has ever been seen on the surface of this godforsaken rock. At one point in a major battle, the Union lost 7,000 men in a matter of minutes. 7,000 people dead in a matter of fucking minutes. In an age where the technology was still primarily muzzle loaders and swords and bayonets. Killing 7,000 people with a barrage of cluster munitions, that isn't shit. 7,000 men dying in minutes in an age of muskets and cannon, swords. battles where over 50,000 men would be lost over the course of a single day. 50,000 men. Have you ever been in a sports stadium with a seating capacity of 50,000? Imagine every single man, woman, and child in those seats dead in the span of a day. And I don't mean just dead, I mean horribly dead, bloody, mutilated, unidentifiable, splattered across 20 or 30 yards of battlefield by grape shot, run down in a cavalry charge and trampled beyond recognition. Do you feel me? Are you tracking? We survived that as a nation. Some of us, myself included to a greater or lesser degree, think that maybe the preservation of the Union was not necessarily the greatest outcome. But nevertheless, the Union was preserved. The Union perseveres. And the spirit of the Confederacy has found space within that fucking Union. And our boys in the South still fucking stand strong. And we still fight like family, but we are one fucking country, the greatest country, the healthiest patient on the cancer ward. Do you feel me? We are fortunate enough to live in a time like that. So let's count those blessings and take solace in our strength. Our strength, which we have demonstrated to the world, and what we have survived as a nation, and our strength as individuals. Our fathers and our grandfathers were much stronger men than we were to get through times like that. But if I'm going to pray for anything, I'm going to pray that we can take solace in our strength to persevere through everything that has gone before, and that we can find our strength as individuals to take up the mantle and find our strength for what is to come. Because make no mistake, it's coming. Make no mistake, it's coming. We're already in it, up to our knees, and that water is rising. But I believe, not all of us, not the herd, not the grazers, not the ones who are fearful and need to be led, but people like me and people like you who can find the strength to stand for ourselves. I take solace in that strength. And I believe in my heart of hearts that we have what it takes to push going forward and to stand and shock the world again with what we are able to beat back, and how well we are able to persevere. And if we do go out, we go out on our feet with smiles on our faces and knuckles up. If it's going to be a death, let it be a good death, and let me go out standing. I am the Reverend. That is the gospel. Appreciate you guys being here, man. Merry Christmas to all of you who celebrate season. I wish the best to each and every one of you out there. I thank you for every kindness and every respect. And a week from now, we're going to be closing out the year with our last sermon of 2022, heading into 2023, and we're going to see exactly where our strength is and what trials we're going to be asked to endure, to demonstrate that strength, how we are going to be tried. And pray that when we are tried, we are not found wanting. I appreciate you guys being here. Look, if anything I threw out today changed your worldview, was information that maybe you hadn't heard of, whatever, I'm going to pass around that digital collection plate. It's the end of the sermon. We pass around our plate for the offering. I'm going to pass around that digital collection plate. If you guys want to throw me some coin, that would be fantastic. I'm on PayPal. I'm on Cash App. I'm on Zelle. I'm on Venmo. I'm on every goddamn thing. If you want to know what my contact info is on any of those apps, just hit me with a personal message. I'll be happy to send it to you, man. But having said that, I understand that we are still living in a Biden economy. I still get that. So maybe some of you guys aren't as able as you might have been once upon a time to throw me a little bit of coin, and that's totally okay. Totally okay, I get it. Here's what you can do for me, though. While I've still got platforms and I'm still accessible on those platforms, doing their best to pull me off, spread the word. Particularly if you're on a platform that I've already been booted, right? If you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitter, if you're on whatever, Rumble, if you're on BitChute, if you're on, maybe you're on some platforms that I haven't even heard of. Maybe you're on Odyssey that I'm not on yet, or some of the other ones I've heard of and just haven't had time to look into. Repost, man. Share it, man. Share the message. All of my Reverence Rangers, my Sinner Sisters, my Prophets of Doom out there, repost. Let them know, hey, man, there's this fat, crippled, old, toothless motherfucker, crane operator with some opinions, and once a week on a Sunday, he gets on rants and raves for an hour or two. He's a like-minded, kindred spirit. Maybe you dig what he's got to offer. But above and beyond anything else, what you do for me is what you can do for yourself. Talking about the directives, people, and you guys already know what the directives are. They will try. The signal-to-noise ratio is all fucked up right now. They will try to bury you in the noise and distract you with the noise. You got to be the signal that breaks through the noise. They will try to bury you in the darkness. They will convince you there is nothing but darkness. They will try to demoralize, dehumanize you with the darkness. You have to be the light that breaks through the darkness. But first and foremost, the iron rule. They'll try to bury you with weakness, make you feel like you're weaker than you are. You got to be that strength in a world full of weakness, because without that strength, you're not going to be able to have the energy and the fortitude to get through and be the signal that breaks through the noise and be the light that breaks through the darkness. You first and foremost got to have the strength to get through it. That's what you got to have, man. You got to have that strength in a world full of weakness. Be the signal, not the noise, the light, not the darkness, and the strength, not the weakness. I appreciate you guys being here. I love y'all. I'm the Reverend. That is the gospel. I'm out. Peace. See you next Sunday. Thanks for being here, people. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Love ya. And I do.